Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, April 24th, and I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and we have a great broadcast for you today. Alan has some insightful interviews with Chris O'Malley, President and CEO at Logarithm, Jonathan Rende, Senior Vice President of Products at PagerDuty, and Mikkel Laka, Director of Product Management at OneSpan. Then, Bonnie leads a discussion about the launch of Ecotech Insights, which will be then followed by interviews from KubeCon Cloud Native Con Amsterdam 2023. Then, to wrap up everything, Mike is going to interview Paul Truelove, CEO at SecureAuth, and Mike Leiborg, CISO at Swimlane. So without further ado, let's get this broadcast started. Enjoy.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. You know, I've been waiting for this gentleman to come back on since I found out he had moved over to, or he was appointed CEO of his company, Logarithm. I'm really happy to have him on. You've seen him on Techstrong TV before, though. It's my friend Chris O'Malley. Hey, Chris, how are you? Welcome.
I'm good, Alan. How are you? Always good to see you, man.
Great to see you. So, Chris, same Chris, different company. Why don't for those in our audience maybe who aren't familiar though with Chris O'Malley, why don't you give them a little bit of your story, and then let's talk about Logarithm.
Sure. I can't keep a job. Is that my problem, or?
Nah. Well, you were at the last place a long time, Chris.
That's right. So, I mean, my background, I way back, I was a computer science major and I was terrible at it. So I went into sales and grew up through the ranks in tech companies. The latest kind of round before I came to Logarithm was CEO of CompuWare. That was a significant transformation of an old mainframe company who, adopted agile DevOps value stream methodologies, kind of reinvented the mainframe market in terms of what was possible with that platform. I give a lot of accolades to all the folks at CompuWare. They did a tremendous job of basically remaking the entire market. Obviously, IBM's done a fantastic job on the hardware side, but again, that was a significant success. It was actually one of the best value creation events in private equity history was CompuWare. So, and that has everything to do with the hard work that those folks put into it and the difference that they made in innovating on the platform. And then I came to Logarithm now about a year ago. It was February 15th of last year. Logarithm as a company, and it's probably worth talking about them a little bit, has a proud history. This is a company who arguably started the SIEM marketplace, but it's been in the business for 20 years of helping customers to monitor cybersecurity issues, detect problems, and get the right alerts so that they can then investigate and respond to keep the companies that they serve safe and secure. In the digital age right now, every company is a cyber company. They got to master these capabilities. They can't be defensive as it relates to creating digital experiences. They got to be aggressive. And you want to do that, though, without compromising security. So this is an incredibly important, area within the marketplace, and every company has issues around it. And Logarithm has been a really good servant to it. Its history is 9 consecutive years in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And again, it's always been kind of the go-to technology as it relates to the mid-market. I came in at a time where the company was going through transition. A lot of these tech companies lose their founders. They kind of lose their passion. They lose their excitement. They lose their sense of perseverance, their customer focus. And Logarithm honestly had some issues. And, I came in at a time where They had done some things in terms of scaling the innovation, but you're having a difficult time getting it to market. We didn't do the things in terms of being as customer centric as we should. We weren't as engaging with partners as we should and necessarily need to. We weren't working with, preferred partners of our customers in the ways that we should. So when I came in very aggressive. We changed virtually all of the senior leadership team. Some have remained that have made a huge difference, but a lot of them have turned over. We brought in a lot of growth mindsets, a different kind of attitude, kind of the passion that I hold for, these spaces. We've retooled our product management team. We brought people in from the outside. We brought some of the best minds that we have internally that really truly understand the customer experience and our partners' needs. We've done an incredible job of building this backlog now of a roadmap that makes us better at these jobs of monitoring, detecting, investigating, and responding to issues. So we help these companies to be more secure. And then we've totally retooled development. Most software companies, having done this long enough, and I've been on boards of companies, and I've obviously been involved with a lot of software companies. Honestly, most of these organizations are really bad at engineering. They're really wasteful in those efforts. They're not really good at having quality releases. They don't have this kind of mindset of driving continuous improvement and velocity, quality, and efficiency of what's delivered. And Logarithm, although it made some significant steps in the right direction, certainly needed a revitalization of the way we did engineering. So we've made dramatic changes in adopting, more right-fitting agile practices that, align to a company that's trying to innovate very, very quickly. We've adopted more aggressively DevSecOps techniques, automating everything intrinsically that we can to get things in terms of the flow better, the bottlenecks out of the system. Again, the velocity, quality, and efficiency we've been driving substantially. So all of those changes took place. And now it shows. So on April 3rd, just like clockwork, we made a promise to the market that we were going to come out with all these innovative new things across the entire portfolio. Again, it's centered on these jobs of monitoring, detection, being able to respond to issues quickly. But this is our fourth consecutive launch. So a company that was struggling as it relates to innovation is now distinguishing itself in terms of the pace by which we're bringing actually new things to market. So it's as though we've kind of rekindled our past. We're going back to our roots, and we're more like we were 10 years ago than certainly we were a year ago. And in the market where our average customer, they've got these companies have high expectations. We're going to do all this stuff in the digital age and be really good at customer experience through digital means and all these high expectations. But behind the scenes is a handful of people that's in terms of the security operations teams that are doing these heroic efforts, but the expectations are way, way beyond what they themselves are able to do. And they need help. They need significant help. These analysts, and these evolving threats are constantly changing, getting worse. And so they need a partner that is on their team, wears their jersey, gets up every morning, passionate about, thinking about how do we better monitor, how do we better detect, how do we better investigate, how do we better respond. And we're getting now in this innovation cycle to stay a step ahead of them. So it's been a radical ride. But I'm really proud that, it's the Logarithm folks are a good core of people. They have a proud history, as I said before, and it's those we've regained our past. And, it's exciting because we have as a company, a moral responsibility as customers. I had a customer in India who's a healthcare network. And, we had some issues with him, and he was challenging me to be better. And feedback is a blessing, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. It's always a blessing. He made an important point. He said, for SIM, for us, is life or death, because we use all these medical devices. If there's somebody who can affect those medical devices externally, make them not work, people can die. People can die. Mm-hmm. And, so that sense of responsibility and accountability, I think the company has warmly now accepted and embracing. And you're seeing just a rate of innovation that's even shocking me. So again, that's kind of getting you up to speed as to where I've been and where I'm at now. But
I love it.
That gives you the introduction to Logarithm.
Yeah. I should mention, look, I'm in security 20 years, Chris. I was there when Logarithm started. Weren't they out of Colorado?
Yep. Boulder, Colorado.
So I was also in Boulder. It's still secure. And there was sort of this fraternity of security companies in the Boulder area. So it was it was much smaller Boulder than it is now. And it was funny because they really, logs were involved, right? It started as sort of that logs analysis growing into SIM.
Yeah.
And now, and then for a while, it wasn't just Logarithm. I think the whole SIM market went through a general malaise where people were like, it's hard. What am I getting out of it? It takes so much to set up. And Logarithm suffered, I think, along with others that, were in that market. But security technologies never die. They kind of get reborn, they get revitalized, and you build upon them with the next generation. And I think that's very much the story here, right? Where SIM's still there. It's better than it ever was, right? And the reasons why SIM was looked upon as not as a savior, but as such a viable piece of the security spectrum are still there as well, right? There's a real job. You hit it. It's in healthcare. It's life and death. In manners of government, with all the espionage and everything we see going on, it's really, really important. This, cybersecurity is mission critical. And being in the cyber market, I learned it's mission critical to every customer you have. Right? You may not think their business is a mission critical business, but to them it is, and that's why it is so important.
One of our, when a customer we recently got was a shock absorber company. So,
really?
Yeah, but I mean the jobs of monitoring your environments, right? Knowing across all of the environment that you've got a sense of everything that's going on, being able to detect things and alert, and doing it without a lot of noise, that you actually got a sense that when something is an alert, that it truly is, and being able then to quickly investigate it with a limited resource. You got to, we've got customers that have 2 people and then in the summer they got an intern. The process of investigating the issue rapidly, right, to contain whatever it is and then respond in an automated way. Those 4 jobs have never been more important, right? And the foundation of that is SIM, UBA, NDR, SOAR. Those elements are basically the means by which you do those jobs well, you nail those jobs. And so, we as a company now are getting aggressive at making and overcoming the issues and challenges you're talking about. If you look at the newest release, making it easier to collect data from, various data sources quickly, because things are changing. You buy a company, you got a bunch of new sources. Somebody in the business side gets a new application. There's constantly this array of new things that are introduced into the environment. So we've made it through these efforts over the last 4 quarters much easier to get data sources into the environment. Our work around creating out-of-the-box content to help you from creating alerts so that you're decreasing the noise, getting a better sense of being able to detect things, so that then you have the means of doing hunting. You can actually do the investigation faster and more quickly, and then automating the tasks of response. We're getting better at helping customers to nail those jobs. So, people talk about SIM, NDR, UEBA, SOAR. It's really those 4 things. Those are the things you got to do. And everything we're doing as a company is obsessed on getting better and better and supporting the customers and taking a very limited resource with high expectations in terms of what they're supposed to do and get them to be more efficient and effective. That will never change. And it's more important today than it was 5 years ago, 10 years, 20 years ago.
Agreed, man. I was with some analysts talking a couple weeks ago. Question came up. Average company, what percentage of the workers are cyber admins, cyber analysts, how many people per 100, whatever, are in the average company dedicated to this mission critical function of cybersecurity? You know what, Chris? It's probably 1% to 2%.
Yeah, there's a dirty little secret, I guess, in the security space, because you get these false sense of things are getting better because you always see these statistics that, IT spend is going to go up 5%, but cybersecurity is going to go up 20, right? So It's like this belief that it's catching up and it's getting to a level where there's a sense of proper investment, the resource allocation is what it needs to be. That is so far from the truth. When you talk to CISOs, it's a bit sad because if you ask them explicitly, how do you get funding? And the ones that are honest with you will say, I have to fight with my other peers because usually I report to the CIO. I don't usually report to the CEO. So I've got to go to the CIO and say, I need more money to secure what that guy's trying to build. And that's a hard argument to make. If it ain't built, what do you got to squeeze? So it's this constant tug of war and zero-sum game. And for most, customers in the mid-market that we serve, you'll constantly hear it's a CISO. If it's a large organization, it's going to be 10 people, maybe. If you're talking JP Morgan Chase and Citicorp, that's a different deal.
That's a different horse.
No, but if you're kind of a large end, you're talking 10 people. So it's at the low end of what you just said in terms of percentage. But most often it's 2 or 3 people. And these people are asked to do heroic things because
they're no Hercules.
They're staff for a stable state, right? They're not staff for the emergency. So you see them when there is issues and working in this heroic way, right? And that's why these tooling sets are so critically important, right? You're trying to be preventive, or at least if things do happen, that you're reacting very quickly, because these things can get out of hand very fast. And now you've got unplanned work in these enterprises. You got the disruption of the fact that, you've got to expose it to the outside world as something bad. So, these companies are asking a lot of very few people. I think, 5 years ago, when you hear like Equifax and SolarWinds and, those breaches happened, and in each instance, they blame the summer intern, right? I mean, it's a summer.
You believe that
the reaction to those companies at an executive level was to fire everybody. They fired all the CEO.
Let's just fire the intern.
I think, it's maybe it's the same summer intern in both times. So when you just get that guy out of the equation, we'd be all better. But I mean, I think companies now know that our expectations for the business are huge. And we're expecting way too much of these folks. And that, now we have to better invest in these areas like monitoring, detection, investigating, and response. So I do feel more of a sense that we've got to close that gap. There's a realism that's getting into it.
Yeah, there is.
But I do think it's woefully underfunded by most, and it's I mean, if most of the CISOs, God bless them, I feel it's a very difficult, tenuous job, but most of them try their best every day, but they go home at night, they have a statue of the Virgin Mary with candles around it, and they pray to God that nothing bad happens. I mean, it's
Chris, it's been like that for
as long as I've been in security, it's always been a top 3 priority, but their hands are too short to reach the bottom of their pockets.
Yeah.
We only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to mention this to the audience. Look, there's this new logarithm release out. It has unlimited upgrade services to enrich the security analyst experience. What exactly does that mean, Chris?
Yeah, so we're coming out with new releases every quarter, and our customers talk to us about the fact that's a lot to do in terms of upgrades. So they need help keeping pace, given the limited resources that we got. So, and helping them to basically take advantage of what we're coming out with. in self-managed environments, we're going to do it for them. So that service is basically a risk-free way to get up to speed. I also wanted to, we also announced enhancements around Axon. So this is a brand new product for us that just came out in October. It's our cloud-native technology that's evolving into basically a SIM. So it's a consumed service. The example of that, there's been 20 enhancements. So every 2 weeks, we're increasing, the value, the scalability, the reliability of that environment for customers. This is going to be a huge product for us in the future. So we're very excited. We started from scratch on that product. We didn't use a line of code from our classic product set. So we've got no technical debt. The speed by which we're making that into a security operations platform is going to blow away the industry. And we're going broadly within the states here, starting April 1st in terms of go-to-market. We'll take that to Europe, next quarter. So we expect great things around that, but please stay tuned to Axon as well.
I love it. Chris, people want to get more information on Axon, on the new capability. Just go logarithm.com.
Or send me an email. It's chris.o'malley, no apostrophe, at logarithm.com. Send me a note. I'm here to help, and I love to engage with customers always. So please let me know. I'll be your first sales rep. I'll be your first sales rep.
That's the Chris O'Malley way, man. I love it. You got to love it.
Chris, man, I can't tell you how great it is to see you. Are you going to be over at RSA in a few weeks?
I will be.
We're broadcasting live there all week on Broadcast Alley. Come stop by, say hello. Maybe we'll talk. I'll have my people talk to your people. Let's get you on at RSA, okay?
Love you, Alan. You're awesome.
Good to see you, man. Chris O'Malley, CEO at Logarithm here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. If you've watched Techstrong TV over the months and years, you may have seen this man before. He's my friend Jonathan Rendy. Jonathan is the SVP of Products at PagerDuty, and we're happy to have him. Hey, Jonathan, how are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's great to see you again. I hope all's well. You know what, Jonathan? Not everyone watches every interview on Techstrong TV as much as it hurts my heart. So for those maybe who aren't familiar with you, why don't you give them a little of the Jonathan Rendy story, and we'll transition that into the PagerDuty story.
Yeah, happy to, Alan. So I've been at PagerDuty for coming up on 6 years now, a veteran of the industry and a number of companies over the last couple of decades. I'm the SVP of Products, as you mentioned. So I've had the opportunity to work across the whole portfolio. And in the last couple of years, have been focused on our new and emerging products, and am one of the individuals responsible for when Rundeck came in and became a part of PagerDuty. And we fully integrated that now. So really excited to share a couple of the next generation steps that we're releasing now.
Absolutely. And John, I think most of our audience is familiar with PagerDuty, but there might be some folks out here who aren't. So beyond the runbook and Rundeck stuff, bigger picture, how would you describe PagerDuty to them?
Yeah, well, PagerDuty's been around for over a decade now, and been really essential infrastructure, an essential solution that DevOps teams and IT ops teams use to deal with real-time interruptions and real-time work and get engaged in the right way, so that the fewest number of people are at the issue working in a war room to help fix those disruptions, that interrupted work as quickly as they can in the most effective, efficient way. And so, that's kind of at the core of incident response, is where we've come from. But now we're really excited. With the inclusion of our process automation, formerly Rundeck, and lots of other pieces, we've added a lot of complements in the AI ops area, in the process automation area, even in customer service operations, connecting the front office to the back office when there are issues. And so we call all of this and is the operations cloud. So a lot of people know us for incident response, but we've greatly expanded what we've done into these adjacent areas with a lot of synergy and complementary capabilities.
I love it. And just before we jump into this, pagerduty.com for people who want to get more information. Right? Okay. So, Jonathan, let's talk about it. New announcement, new functionality, feature sets coming out. Clue us in.
Yeah. So, as one of the pillars of the operations cloud, process automation, formerly known as Rundeck to many folks out there, was started as a open source project, is still an open source project, and that community we're working closely with. But the whole idea of Rundeck was to create a plane of automation for all your operational needs in an organization to sit on top and really expand the use of automation for IT ops teams, for DevOps teams, in a variety of different uses. And one of the areas we've been really focused on over the last 2 years as Rundeck has become, and as we refer to it, process automation has become a part of PagerDuty, is creating a SaaS version of the on-premise commercial product and integrating that tightly into the existing PagerDuty platform, the Operations Cloud. So today, what we're here to talk about and really excited in what it's doing, more importantly for our customers and adding value, is that new release, the latest release, which is really a re-architecture, a new architecture. It's a big step forward in the world of automation when you think of the coming together of cloud SaaS worlds and on-prem worlds, this hybrid nature and the complexity of running automation in all the different zones and networks, and doing that centrally for a team so that they can scale and get a lot more efficiency out of their automation and ultimately take out a lot of toil and a lot of cost in doing so. So really excited about our process automation release now.
Excellent. Just to it was almost 2 years ago, the Rundeck acquisition, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little over 2 years ago. It was November 2 years ago.
Yeah. And so the integration here, has, it's been done sort of organically. It's not been rushed. I mean, immediately there was some affinities that, that played well to each other. But this to me sounds like it's now finally truly, holistically part of the PagerDuty tool set.
Yeah, part of the Operations Cloud. That's
exactly it. That's what you guys do there.
So, if you don't mind, Jonathan, let's for our audience out here, they're an SRE, they're an IT ops guy. What does this really mean? Like, how is day to day? How are they using it? What are they doing?
A really, really important point to hit. Sometimes we get lost in some of the big announcements here and make it real practical. So what we've done is, again, we've created a pure SaaS version of this. And whether it's SaaS or on-premise, we're still supporting both. That's not the big issue or the big challenge here, because there's always going to be a need for multiple models of use. But what we've done in this new architecture and the new release of the product is a couple of things. We realize that there, for every SRE out there, for every IT ops person who's building run books, who's building jobs that they need to run, that they're increasingly having to run those more and more complex jobs across more complex environments and networks. So they may have to build a script or a job that has to run across multiple zones or multiple networks that are secure. And they need to be able to do that without compromising or creating any risk in how these jobs are running, whether it's increasing compute capacity on a machine, taking down a service, bringing it back up, a typical activity that might happen during a major incident that's happening. And so the running of these steps in this complex environment, we've just hugely simplified it. And so what do I mean by that? Well, it used to be before, if you wanted to work across multiple secure environments, people had to poke a hole in a firewall, or they had to secure shell, SSH, into an area and then have the script run there. And sometimes they would share the credentials of that script that needed to operate in that secure environment. So they might ultimately need to deploy a few versions of Rundeck in these different areas to run. Well, now we've made it hugely efficient that from a central, either on-prem or SaaS capability, to be able to build all of your automation jobs that will run and, drive all of the things you want to do on these elements of your infrastructure across all those different environments in, what we call a zero trust world, where you can trust that we're just HTTPSing into those. It's completely secure communication, central administration and creation of the jobs, but a knowledge and intelligence that's going into all of the runners, as we call them, that run all the scripts in all these areas. It's really groundbreaking. It's going to make life so much easier for all the SREs in how they create and how they then run and expose all of these automation jobs for the individuals across the organization. So huge time savings.
Yeah, absolutely is. Absolutely is. Jonathan, forgive me. This announcement, the release is available now. It's going to be available. What's the story?
It is available. We have, as I said, a few flavors of our process automation product as a part of the Operations Cloud. We have the open source. So a part of this goes into open source. And then we have the commercial on-prem version. And then we have the SaaS version as well as an option that we're really excited about getting customers going on. And those are available now.
Absolutely great. And as we mentioned before, pagerduty.com. Jonathan, what else is happening? We haven't had you on, unfortunately, in a while. And, what else new at PagerDuty can you share?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the Operations Cloud, it's really the parts, the sum of the parts are greater than the individual pieces. And I talked about our core incident response and what we call our AI ops solution. And obviously this is the next generation of process automation and a customer service operations solution. All of them work together. Well, your question about what's new, we're also getting ready to make a set of announcements around our AI ops product, which is another form of automation out there. Right. It's PagerDuty, a lot of people think about it as a huge pipeline that takes in information and telemetry from all kinds of monitoring products and ticketing products. And we make sense of that so that those teams, when they come together in a unplanned outage or a war room activity, when they come together, they have all the information they need and they can resolve it. Well, what we were just talking about, process automation, the former Rundeck product, is really about the resolving of that, in addition to other use cases, but it's about the resolving of those issues, the actual taking action. But the upfront piece, the automating of that, all those events flowing in, our AI ops solution, making sense of all the noise, getting to the, what we like to say, improving the signal to noise ratio for SRE teams and for IT operations and for developers. We have a big new release that's coming out there that we're really excited about, that we're starting to share with the press right now. So that's going to be another big area.
You can't walk more than 5 feet without running into some kind of AI, Jonathan.
Yeah, we continue to really push the envelope on machine learning and AI. And I think, there's so much fear out there, Alan, with what is this going to do? Is it going to eliminate jobs? our whole approach over the years has been, this can be a huge assist. If you think of this as like the Marvel character, Iron Man, it gives an individual the capability to do more, to make better decisions with suggestions. And we've tried to leverage that. And that's our approach for our AI ops products and the rest of the operations cloud as well.
Jonathan, I've been in technology a long time. Every technology innovation, you always hear, the sky is falling folks who says, oh my God, I'm going to be obsolete at 29. And it's never the case, right? It's usually these kinds of innovations spur new jobs, spur more jobs, and spur more interesting jobs, because these kinds of innovations generally automate the mundane. Right, and allow workers to focus on more interesting, varied kind of more complex problems.
I couldn't agree more. It's I think these types of innovations, these steps forward, create more opportunities for individuals. For all those continual learners out there, it just creates more opportunities. I always joke with my kids. I'm like, the job that you're going to wind up in, it probably doesn't exist today. My job didn't exist when I was in school. So it's crazy how that works.
I just had, so my boys, one's in law school, one's a junior in, undergrad. And I've told them, look, guys, you got to think about, what is AI going to mean in terms of your career at this point? Because I think one by one, it is going to disrupt so many different markets. Not that it's going to make people obsolete, but people are going to, you need to think about, how do I leverage that to be a better whatever I'm going to be, right? And I think that is the key. Anyway, Jonathan, we're out of time, man. It's always great seeing you, and continued success to you and all of our friends at PagerDuty. Say hello to Damon for us. For our audience out here, head over to PagerDuty.com. Check out all the new flavors and ways you can utilize PagerDuty to make your life easier. We're going to take a break on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Alan.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I have what I hope is going to be a great discussion for you guys to listen to right now. Let me introduce you to Michael Laca, and excuse my terrible French. Michael, why don't you pronounce it correctly for our audience?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Alan. So my name is Michael Lacal. I'm Director of Product Management for OneSpan.
Thank you. Michael, why don't we start off with a little bit of your own personal story, your own background, and a little bit about OneSpan?
Yeah, thank you. So my personal history, I started working in financial services in banks, many banks here in Europe, and specifically in France, and I decided to move to the cybersecurity to provide this solution. So we started with the digital signature or e-signature, what we call electronic signature, and then now I'm moving to more security, authentication, identification, this kind of technology.
Excellent. And then OneSpan, if you can give us a little background.
So OneSpan is it's a 20 years old company, and what we are doing today is really, we are managing transaction, and we secure this transaction based on 5 main pillars. We can address, when it comes to a transaction, you need to deal with the known or unknown end user. So we have the ability right now to onboard someone with identification. That's the first pillar. Or we can authenticate an existing clients. And then we have a signature solution. We have also interaction solution like a secure Zoom, a video conference that we can secure to have like interaction with something like a virtual branch for when it comes to banks, for instance. And we have the last pillar, which is storing the information, because as soon as you perform a transaction and you complete a transaction, you need to be able to store the artifact, what we call the audit trail, to prove this transaction if in case of dispute. And the dispute could happen like 1 year or 10 years after the transaction happened.
Absolutely. And for people who want to get more information about OneSpan, let us just get that out of the way. What the website for OneSpan?
So the website is onespan.com. It's an American company now, but we are operating globally. We are operating with the top 100 banks and financial services in the world, but not only. We're operating in general in all the high regulated industry to manage transaction. So onespan.com, you can find a lot of material, use cases, and so on. That's an end-to-end solution to secure transaction, as I said.
Excellent. All right. Now that we've got that out of the way, Mikhail, let us turn to what we want to discuss today, and that is this whole AI, generative AI, ChatGPT, etc. It seems, in a season full of doom and gloom in the tech industry, right? Banks failing and valuations down and people losing their jobs. The bright spot, more than a bright spot, it's a gleaming bright spot, like red hot, is this whole area of AI, as if AI all of a sudden burst on the scene yesterday and we haven't been working on it for the last 30 or 40 or more years. But nevertheless, it is having its moment. And whether it is the dawn of a new day or just the continued evolution of what's going on, it certainly has captured the world's attention. You can't walk more than 3 feet without, running into something about AI. 2 weeks ago now, maybe 3 weeks ago by the time this plays, 100 leading lights in the tech world, or something like that, put out an open letter asking for a moratorium or a pause on continued development around these, generative AI, giant AI experiments, ChatGPT, etc. And it's not just ChatGPT. We should be clear. Google has Bard, and probably there's a lot more out there as well. We know. I'm interested. What's your take on this?
So I think, this letter is a good initiative, but now, we need to face the reality of things. The reality is, I don't think we can stop the train here. This is, first of all, this AI or ChatGPT is not new. The AI exists. At OneSpan, we use AI for multiple things, like risk-based authentication based on behavioral, to make some analysis on the way you behave when you transact with your bank or any organization. My point here is, it's not a new technology. It's just the fact that ChatGPT opened this technology to everyone. So everyone can use it, including potentially the hackers. And that's the risk.
Absolutely. And to me, it's a question of you can't stuff a genie back in the bottle, right? It's kind of out there, and people are going to use it. When I look at this letter, though, there's two sort of distinctions I would ask your opinion on. One is, okay, we can't put the genie back in the bottle, but if we don't continue developing it and it stays sort of frozen where it is now, is it still a risk? And is that even possible, quite frankly, right? That people are just not going to develop from where we are now. What is the risk? What's the existing risk? And then secondly, assuming we can't do that, and we continue to develop, what are the, let's strip away the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and get down to the real risk. What are the risks? It seems to be, at this point, to be primarily cybersecurity related, though I think there are much greater potential risks with continued development. But that might be pie in the sky, fairy tale stuff as well. So who knows? Mikhail, what's your take?
So let's list the big 4 points when it comes to risk associated with ChatGPT. I see 4 major risks right now. The first one is ChatGPT can help Forrester create more believable native sounding phishing campaign. If you think about it, including, of course, emails, dialogues, that tricks or coerce user into giving their authentication credential. That's one risk identified. Now, just to illustrate that, suppose a human requires 1 hour to compose a personalized phishing email to try to phish your bank account, Alan, for instance. With ChatGPT, this can be automated and therefore go much faster than it is today. So that's one of the risks identified. Now, by saying that, I want to say also something else. It's ChatGPT right now, with the knowledge and the level of ChatGPT has today, we can compare it to a mediocre hacker, because it's based on existing technology, existing fraud attack. We know most of the organizations already have the tools to prevent that. But what about the future? The future, if we cannot find the latest bug, or you will never have a sophisticated attack with ChatGPT. But the fact that this AI may in the future have access to more recent data maybe could be more able to create more sophisticated attacks and could be more complicated to prevent. So that's one of the risks identified, which is the phishing attack. Other risk is malicious code, because ChatGPT can create and generate malicious code, so it can help, anyone can become a hacker. You and me, we can become a hacker by using ChatGPT. Does it mean that are we going to be good hackers? Most probably not. But it just gives us more power to automate a number of attacks and having a systemic attacks on one organization we can target, for instance. Other attacks, could happen ChatGPT can be used to create fake online persona, like deepfake, where I mentioned, for instance, the unknown user identification, when you need to identify someone, a pure prospect, someone you never had any information about. You can fake his face, you can fake a passport, you can fake a driving license, you can fake any type of document, a proof of address with ChatGPT. Again, this is not a new fraud. It's just the fact that this technology can automate a certain number of tasks, which used to be manual tasks for hackers, and where, we can detect that it was done in Africa and Russia and China, whatever, the origin of the attack. But the thing is, with this automated, powerful tool, make it more efficient. That's really one of the risks we see right now with this technology.
I agree. So there's two kinds of people in the world, in my world here on Techstrong TV, right? There's our audience who are tech people, right? And they look at things like ChatGPT and generative AI and AI in general. And you're right. Many of people in our audience have been using solutions or developing solutions that have ML AI type of capabilities for a long time, not new. It's gotten better, as we continue to develop. But they look at the ChatGPT kind of generative AI stuff and say, wow, can it write quality code? Can it perform better data analysis for observability, cybersecurity, stuff like that? And then the dark side. Can it write malware? Can it help evade? So in other words, very technical applications of the technology. Then there's another kind of person in the world. I was at a family gathering last week, and this whole thing came up, and I opened up my iPad, and I gave a quick demonstration. I asked it to write a report on something in the style of that kind of poem. And for non-technical people, Mikhail, they look at this and they're they think it's sentient. They think there's real consciousness in there. And to them, it's cybersecurity is the tip of the iceberg. It's how is it going to it'll wreak havoc on social media with fake news. All the way from there, all the way up to like Skynet, doomsday type of scenarios. This open letter to pause, is it aimed at our tech audience or is it aimed at that general audience?
I would say the general audience, of course, because right now, the tech are very aware of the limitation these tools. Any developer can, any developer who is interested in following the news right now, try, to use ChatGPT to generate code and make his own analysis. And all of them can tell you that right now, the quality of the code, whatever is for a program or for malware, because as a security company, we test it as well, it's not like efficient. It's like mediocre code. Now, as I said, you can use it on an automated way, which could help, to automate a certain number of tasks, but it never replace a human. It never replace a brain of a human with a clear analysis. Today, tomorrow, no one knows right now. Could be, but again, this is a technology. I like your analogy with social media. Social media could be a very good thing. It depends on how are you following. So with ChatGPT, the way you're feeding the technology, the AI, and the type of information they can access to it, will make a big difference. So that's why for me, there is the generic AI like ChatGPT, which is scanning the web, and you have also the private AI right now who can really help. And this is what we are using right now for facial recognition, or for instance, or document verification, or what we call name matching or anti-money laundering, which is used in different industry. But this is private technology that fully controlled with some secret, with algorithm and so on. That's, for me, another level. And this one, cannot bypass the other, if you see my point. So
I see it, sure.
So again, we really need to differentiate, like the general audience, to your point, with some specialist audience, because AI can create fraud, as I said, but AI can prevent the fraud as well.
Yes. So let's assume for a moment, though, look, we're kidding ourselves. No one's going to pause the continued development of this. As cybersecurity, and a good chunk of our audience are cybersecurity professionals here. As cybersecurity professionals, what would be your advice? What should we do?
I think, of course, we need to follow and we need to keep an eye on this technology, but we need to continue, as I said, developing our own technology, because if you want to prevent this kind of attacks, the best way to prevent it is, first of all, to educate people about that, but also make sure that there are different organizations who could be targeted by this technology for cyber attack are well geared to prevent that. So it's time for right now to give you some concrete example. When it comes to authentication, you need to identify you're Alan. I need you to authentify you as Alan. So what we used to do right now, and it depends from a country to another one, we can ask you, to send a one-time password by SMS. This is, what most of the technology are doing, or most of the organization are doing. Is it secure? Absolutely not. It's not. So, because SMS, you have SWIM swapping and so on, you have different things. But for the same use cases, if I ask you, Alan, to authenticate, and I have a solution like risk-based authentication based on AI, machine learning, and I can follow the way the device you're using, how you use it, how you type your password, how I can ask you for facial recognition if needed, depending on the risk of the transaction and so on. This is, where AI can, to my point, is helping to prevent that, and having this kind of solution ready can prevent any type of phishing attack, malware attack, or these kind of things. It has to be automated based on personal behavior, personal data. We can store as a security company, and we can recognize that it's you, Alan. We are sure that it's you who is interacting with us. And if needed, we can add another layer of security. If we detect any suspicious activity from you, like you don't use the device you use to connect with. maybe you have a new phone, maybe you have a new laptop. So we need to detect that. If that's the case, we need to identify this laptop. We need to identify, we geolocate you today in Florida and next week in Amsterdam, for instance. So that's, the kind of information we can cross. But that's just a couple of examples. We can collect like 200 points of information based on a simple authentication or identification. And this is where, this organization need to accelerate the digital transformation, because if you think about it, when internet started, it was based on trust. And now we are losing this trust. So we need to come back to this trust. And this is, what OneSpan and all the cybersecurity company are trying to do right now is to protect this organization, to bring back the trust in the equation. And that's going to happen. That's going to accelerate. Right now, I consider we are still in the Web 2.0, but when it comes to Web 3.0 or 4.0 with the metaverse or whatever it is going to be, or decentralized information, the idea here is really to bring back the trust into the equation, into the interaction between an end user and an organization, or two end users who are interacting together. So that's where, I think this new technology need to be used to bring back the trust and make sure that everyone can trust the online banking, the online healthcare, his doctor, connecting to any organization with a high level of trust, high level of security.
Excellent. Mikhail, when we started, I said this goes really fast. We're way over 15 minutes, but I enjoyed the conversation. And I would love to bring back the trust, as you said, right? As I said, this is the reason why we can't have nice things on the internet, is this lack of trust, lack of security. I look forward to continuing our conversations at some point, though. Whether when next time I'm in France, or maybe if OneSpan, I don't know if OneSpan's going to be at the RSA conference in a couple of weeks, we'll be live streaming there all week. But let's do that. And thank you for coming on Techstrong TV today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
All right. Mikhail Lacar, Director of Product Management at OneSpan. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be right back.
Your DevOps adventure starts here. At DevOps On-Ramp 23, you'll find everything you need to get started with DevOps. Best practices, processes, and tools. Tips and tricks from experienced practitioners sharing their real-world experiences. This virtual event will provide you with the roadmap to a successful DevOps career and the opportunity to get hands-on experience. The rush has started. Don't be left behind. Join us on May 4th, 2023.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live session. I'm Bonnie Schneider, Sustainability Contributor to the Techstrong Group, and I'm pleased to have you here all joining us now for this informative and engaging conversation. With Earth Day just 2 days away, now is the perfect time to discuss the impact of climate change on the tech industry and sustainable solutions. And I'd also like to introduce our new sustainability initiative at Techstrong, EcoTech Insights. We're also going to discuss innovative solutions for reducing emissions in the tech sector, ESG regulations, and their importance to DevOps professionals. Remember, this is an interactive conversation, so I encourage all of you to participate by asking questions and sharing your thoughts in the comments section. We're going to do our best to address as many of you as possible with your questions during the live stream. My background is as a meteorologist, and I have witnessed an increasing amount of these disasters occurring in terms of the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, certainly over the past 2 decades. Now, these changes are linked, many of them, to different types of weather, is what I'm referring to. They can be linked directly to climate change, and some are, of course, directly linked to human activities and the resulting emissions of greenhouse gases. As a result, it has become more critical than ever to understand the impacts of climate change on various industries, including the IT sector. IT infrastructure and services can be impacted by extreme weather events such as floods, wildfires, and heat waves. These events can disrupt operations, damage equipment, and lead to downtime. So first, I want to share with you some examples of some of the weather events that we've seen that have had direct impacts globally that have affected the IT infrastructure, data centers, and some places that you may have already read about this when it happened. So first, I want to go back to 2011. There was flooding in Thailand, and that disrupted the supply chain for back then hard disk drives, and that led to a 28% reduction in global disks produced. Major companies like Western Digital had to halt their operations in affected areas. And in New York City, this was one I covered personally, Superstorm Sandy. Remember, that was in 2012. Well, not only did that cause major power outages that affected so many and flooding damage, but we also saw flooding at data centers, such as Datagram's facility right in New York City. And that led to downtime for websites that you might know, like BuzzFeed or the Huffington Post. Damages were estimated to be at $30 billion. Now we'll bring things a little closer to the current time. In 2019, there was a major heat wave in Europe, and that led to increased cooling costs for data centers, with temperatures reaching record highs, 46 degrees Celsius to 114 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty hot. Well, that impacted facilities like OVH's data center in Strasbourg, France, and also in California in 2020, the following year, wildfires affected air quality and caused temporary shutdowns of data centers. In fact, Apple had to temporarily close its Elk Grove facility due to poor air quality caused by the fires. And one thing you have to remember about wildfires and air quality, the air quality can remain poor long after the fire has been put out. So you can still have poor air quality even weeks after. And another thing to note is that the winds can travel the ash and the soot from those wildfires for miles. So it can, even if you're not directly next to where the fire is, facilities can be impacted by those wildfires. Wildfires are also burning with more intensity and affecting more areas due to climate change. Well, let's talk about 2021. So we're switching gears in extreme weather events. First, we're talking about wildfires, but let's talk about winter. Do you remember this? Just in 2021, there was a massive winter storm in Texas, and it led to tremendous power outages, but it also disrupted IT services, and that impacted companies like Rackspace, which had to rely on backup generators to keep their data centers running during the crisis. I want to go to the live stream and see if we have any comments yet. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting about how this is all affecting, weather is affecting so many areas of IT infrastructure. I think we think of personally how it affects our homes when we lose power, and it certainly does, but it also affects the community in a greater way. Now, I want to also bring it back to even more recently, because just last year in 2022, we had record heat. Remember, in London and across Europe, record hot temperatures. In fact, the hottest temperatures ever in parts of France. Well, I wrote about this recently on my blog on ecotechinsights.com. That's spelled ECO techinsights.com. And that's a brand new website connected to devops.com, where you can read more about what happened in 22 and how the heat impacted data centers there. And a lot of other information. It's a website which we just debuted. You'll be able to see videos that air on Techstrong TV with thought leaders in climate tech, those that are coming up with incredible solutions for the climate crisis, how to track carbon emissions, and more. So I highly recommend you check out that website, ecotechinsights.com. Before we go on, I want to just give you some strategies of how you can boost your organization's resilience to extreme weather events. And starting with the fact that we are now in April, we're in the spring season, and this is the biggest season where we see floods. So at least in the US. So I want to talk about the fact that it's a good idea for organizations to evaluate their flood risk and relocate critical infrastructure if necessary. Implement flood-resistant designs like barriers and flood walls, raised foundations, and always be ready for those potential supply chain disruptions, including alternate routes and suppliers. And of course, really for any of these events, you want to regularly review your plan and make sure you've taken the proper precautions to assess risk and plan for it with measures in place. Well, June 1st will be the start of the Atlantic hurricane season, and that affects so many people. So it's important that everyone, for their organizations, make sure you have your disaster plan in place. And this also applies to flooding because this is a byproduct of these storms. Make sure your waterproof servers are enclosed and implement redundant power supplies. Make sure you have backup generators and things like that. It's very important. Also, something we talked about with data centers, it's a good idea to invest in energy efficient cooling systems like liquid or free air cooling, implementing temperature monitoring systems to make sure that you have an automated rapid response. And of course, this is something we saw a lot during the pandemic that's carried on, is having remote work, especially during when we have these power outages or we have extreme heat events. That will help prevent that strain on resources. And finally, with wildfire risk, we want to implement fire-resistant designs like non-combustible materials, fire-resistant landscaping and fire breaks, and of course, make sure you have your disaster plan. Just to get some more comments coming in. It looks like we have some people participating. Apologize here, just trying to get these in. Okay, so we have a question here from Christopher Barnett, and his question is, how can we quantify the effectiveness of our sustainability initiatives? Great question, because that's really the thing. A lot of people have already started on this journey in becoming more sustainable, and they want to be able to talk about how they can improve those areas and monitor it. One of the things that a lot of tech companies have done is relying more on renewable energy, and that includes sourcing solar or wind power for data centers. And that can significantly reduce the carbon footprint while ensuring uninterrupted operations. Some major companies that we all have heard of are implementing these strategies already. I wanted to highlight a few of them for you, like Apple's data center in Maiden, North Carolina. That's powered by a 100-acre solar farm, and that's one of the largest privately owned solar facilities in the US. Google has been carbon neutral since 2007, and they're working towards 24/7 carbon-free energy for its data centers. And they've invested in renewable energy projects, including wind farms in the US and Europe. Microsoft's data center in Cheyenne, Wyoming integrates wind and biogas power to achieve zero carbon operations. And that facility is powered by a local wind farm and a biogas powered fuel cell system. And finally, Amazon Web Services has set a goal to power its global infrastructure with 100% renewable energy. AWS has invested in several wind and solar farms worldwide to reach this objective. And another question that came to me, I guess this one was through email. Can you explain the upcoming ESG rules and regulations in the EU globally and how they might affect the tech industry, and why it's essential for DevOps professionals to be knowledgeable about ESG? Okay, I could definitely answer that because ESG is certainly something that everyone is talking about. So I'm going to break it down for everyone watching. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. It's become a critical focus for businesses worldwide, including the tech industry. And we've seen a rise in new rules and regulations related to ESG, both in the EU and globally. I'd like to outline some of those regulations and how it might impact the tech industry. Well, we have the EU taxonomy regulation, and that establishes classification systems to define environmentally sustainable activities. So that's something that a tech firm, for example, in the EU would have to align their sustainability reporting with this taxonomy. And that's one to keep in mind. Another is the NRFD, which requires large companies to disclose information related to their ESG performance. And tech companies operating in the EU will be needing to comply with a lot of these reporting requirements, and that will help investors and stakeholders make informed decisions. There's also to know, those are just some of the mandatory ones that I mentioned, but there's also voluntary frameworks that tech companies are increasingly adopting to demonstrate their commitment to sustainability and transparency. Now, for those of you that work in DevOps, you may be wondering, well, what does this mean to me? Well, understanding ESG is important for several reasons for DevOps professionals. And let's talk about that for a minute. Understanding ESG risks, it allows companies and people that work in these organizations to drive innovation within the tech industry, which is really crucial for them to be aware and take action like improving energy efficiency, reducing waste, and upholding ethical labor practices. It all comes together as part of ESG. So DevOps teams can help to develop sustainable products and operate in a more sustainable way, which of course is very supported by the stakeholders of the company. Plus, ESG initiatives also have collaboration across different teams. So DevOps professionals can help foster that from the IT areas to other parts of the company as well. And finally, and you may already have noticed this within your organization, when companies have strong ESG performance, they tend to attract and retain top talent, and that improves the transparency of the companies. So there's lots of different reasons that ESG disclosures influence investment decisions as well. And that's something to keep in mind. It seems that it's kind of an overriding issue that is leading to more sustainable products and services and better operational efficiency and supply chain management as well. So that makes a difference in creating a more resilient business model. And as I mentioned, ESG is something we're going to talk a lot more about on Ecotech Insights and some of the upcoming interviews I'll be doing that you can watch as well. And I think they'll be informative to get a better idea of what's happening with ESG globally and how any initiatives at your own company might be applicable to that. And of course, a big part of this whole sustainability movement that we're doing in the initiative at the Techstrong Group is to give you better information and expert insights and information that you can use in your own work and what you're doing, and create an interactive dialogue so we can better understand the sustainability space and share the latest innovations and the latest solutions that are being brought about. And of course, as I mentioned at the top of this, we have 2 days to Earth Day. It's really Earth Month throughout the month of April. So this really was the perfect time to do this LinkedIn Live. And it looks like I don't see another question from the 3 that I mentioned already. So I'm going to move along because I'm sure some of you are in the middle of your lunch hour. So we're going to wrap up this LinkedIn Live session. And I want to thank you all for your active participation and the questions that came in from ESG to DevOps. It was really a diverse group, and I appreciate that. And I think it's clear that understanding and addressing the impacts of climate change and embracing ESG principles really makes a difference for the tech industry, and it's a big part of what's going to be happening in the future. So we're fostering innovation and ensuring resilience in the face of the many extreme weather events that I mentioned, with spring now being the season for flooding, and then we're going to go into hurricane season and times of extreme heat, excessive heat that, as I mentioned, just last year caused major problems in the UK. So I would love for everyone that's watching now to continue to collaborate, reach out to me, and share ideas at ecotechinsights.com as we support each other in this journey towards more sustainable tech sector. Remember to check out ecotechinsights.com for more information on sustainable solutions and innovations. Once again, I'm Bonnie Schneider. I'm a sustainability contributor to the Techstrong Group, and it's been a pleasure discussing these interesting and important topics with you today. I hope everyone has a terrific rest of your day and a great Earth Day, and let's keep the conversation going.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? Recruit Ops is the new way to source engineering talent. From Media Ops, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world and where you're watching this. I'm Alan Schimmel, and welcome to Techstrong TV. We're going to be kicking off our Day 2 coverage here at Cloud Native Con, KubeCon, in beautiful but cold Amsterdam. Yesterday, if you had a chance to catch our stream, it was an amazing day. I think we had about 20 people on, covering just literally a sold-out KubeCon. There's 10,000 people here. Our first guest today, let me introduce you to him. His name is Marcin Stozek.
Yes, thank you.
Goes by the name of Perk, though, so we're going to call him Perk. Perk, welcome to Techstrong TV. Thanks for being here today.
Hello, Alan. Thank you for the introduction. Very nice to meet you. Hello, everyone watching this live.
So let's first start off with a little bit about yourself. Perk, what do you do?
Hey, so I'm an engineering manager right at this time. I work at Sumo Logic, and what I do is that I work on the open telemetry offering. I work with my team on the open telemetry collector, on the open telemetry libraries. We make our collection easy for the customers and based on the industry-wide open telemetry, so that everyone knows how to easily send data to Sumo.
Excellent, excellent. So you mentioned you work at Sumo. Most of our audience, I think, knows Sumo. They're familiar, but there might be people who don't, or maybe they think of Sumo, oh yeah, they're sort of a SIM security play or this or that. They may not know exactly all of the aspects of Sumo. Why don't Perk, give them a little background if you can.
Sure. So Sumo Logic is actually a very good platform for many use cases. One of them is SIEM, like you mentioned. Another one is observability. So right now we can collect logs, metrics, and traces. Like I think that everybody in the industry right now, they have to converge and get all the signals, all of those types. And that is one of the reasons why we pushed ourselves towards OpenTelemetry, because it covers everything. So Sumo Logic is this platform when you send your data and you have great analytics based on them. So you have alerts, you have dashboards, you have some insights for the future. You can see what was happening, in the past. And all of that with the beautiful and very, very resilient platform. And you don't have to, spend a lot of money on it.
I love it. I love it. All right. And before we jump into what I want to talk about, it's sumologic.com if anyone wants to go to the website, right?
Yes, it's sumologic.com, exactly.
All right. Now that we've got that out of the way, Perk, two sort of announcements coming out here at Cloud Native Con, KubeCon from Sumo. Why don't we, if you don't mind, share them with the audience?
So maybe let's start with the first announcement is the predict operator for the metrics. It is very, very similar to the thing that we had previously that was predict operator for logs. So for metrics, what you can do, you can, based on your historical data, you could see what is the forecast for your future data. So for example, let's imagine you monitor your cost for your Kubernetes cluster. So using the metrics predict operator, you can see what this cost will be in the future. Also, for the logs ingest, for example, if you have a metric for the logs ingest, you can see what is the forecast for that. It's very, very helpful, I guess, for the DevOps teams out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, whenever I hear of forecaster or predictor, I start thinking about AI these days, right? Because everybody's talking about AI. Is this using some sort of machine learning AI type of technology?
Those metrics right now are using the algebra behind that is linear. And as on the AI, unfortunately, I cannot comment at this point.
Okay, no comment then. Let's jump into the second announcement then.
Yes, so we have a second announcement as well, and it's very well connected with the KubeCon that we are here. And you know that before KubeCon we had the co-located events, and one of the co-located events was the observability day.
Yes.
And Sumo Logic right now, the announcement is that we are going to be open telemetry collector native platform. So whenever you want to collect data for Sumo Logic and send them, we claim that we will support our customers with for the open telemetry data collection. So open telemetry collector is our default collector. If you want to send data to Sumo, you can use other tools, but we tell you that, hey, you get the best support if you use the OpenTelemetry collector. Also, if you would like to send the data using the OpenTelemetry libraries, for example, we support that as well. And on top of that, for the collector part, we make it very, very easy actually right now to send those data. So this is like three really easy steps. First of all, you install the collector, then you configure the collector, and then you just send the data with this collector, and you have the very, very nice UI path to do that. So we have like 3 easy steps. You just follow the commands, which are very actually easy, and you're done. You see your data.
I love it. Now, look, this is a trend we're seeing here at the show, right? Open telemetry, which is now, I think, the second largest CNCF open project.
Yes, it is actually right after the Kubernetes.
Yeah. The industry is really rallying around this as a standard, right? I mean, everyone from Sumo Logic and several other vendors here, everyone's moving to open telemetry as the standard. Even I saw the Jaeger team is now feeding into open telemetry. Everybody is coming to this.
Yes.
What's the Sumo Logic special sauce to this, though? In other words, what makes the Sumo Logic integration here different or better? Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, the thing is that what makes us different here is that we say right now that we want to be native, OpenTelemetry native for the data collection and for the OpenTelemetry itself, and everybody seems to be around, like everybody seems to be on board, but not all the companies are there yet. And we say that right now, hey, to our customers, that we are pushing towards this, and that is our promise, that if you use OpenTelemetry, you can use it at Sumo, and for example, our dashboards in the future will be built on the OpenTelemetry collector, on the OpenTelemetry schema. Right. So you don't need to go anymore to our specific documentation, because it is good and the information is there, but if you have the industry standard, you don't have to do it every time you use like different vendors. For example, you use Jaeger for one of your use cases, but you want to use Sumo for the other one. You have the information in the same place because we use the same schema. So I think that our differentiator here is our push, because right now I think we might be one of the biggest user of the OpenTelemetry collector, for example.
Really?
Because we dogfood this binary. It works for us. We push a lot of data. We just did a very, very quick calculations. So we have multiple environments, production environments. Only single one of them, and only for logs, sends 3.5 terabytes of data daily. And we have like 12 of those, and not only for logs, but also for the metrics and for the traces. So we send a lot of data, and we use it internally. We see that it works. We see that using this industry standard is actually very easy, and it's mature enough. It's mature enough to say that, hey, yes, I think it's the time to push.
Excellent. I want to make sure I got this right for our team out here. So by being native to OpenTelemetry, it's not like an API sort of push. It's truly a native.
There is a lot of things actually, So OpenTelemetry native, to me personally, what it means is that you use the libraries, you use the standard, you use the OpenTelemetry source, for example. There is the OpenTelemetry protocol called OTLP. So every vendor who would like to claim they are OpenTelemetry native, they would need to have this as a source. So OpenTelemetry native means that you use OpenTelemetry across the whole telemetry data. So not only on the ingest, not only on the metadata that you add to your data, but also the schema that is used for this metadata. So for example, at Sumo, historically, we use something that is called source type, for example. So we know internally that our schema was created for a purpose, and it was called like that, but that was created like 10 years ago. Right now, everybody should use the same schema, and OpenTelemetry is actually right now merging. That was announced yesterday or 2 days ago. They are merging with the Elastic Common schema for logs, which is great. And because this schema is going to be used industry-wide, we are going to use this for the dashboards as well. So if you come to Sumo Logic from the other tool that uses OpenTelemetry, you can search using the same schema. So pod name is going to be here, there,
in the same place.
You can have like both dashboards, or maybe you can correlate the data because they are the same schema everywhere.
Excellent. For people who want to get more information on this, where can they go?
Also, first thing would be probably the OpenTelemetry website, but also our Sumologic.com website. We have a great documentation of the OpenTelemetry as well. There is many workshops, and if you are interested more, you should probably attend SIG meetings. OpenTelemetry is a project that is done by the open source community.
Right.
So you have gatherings every week, I believe, or every 2 weeks. That depends on which part of the OpenTelemetry you would like to involve yourself. You can go to the meeting. If you have any questions, there are maintainers there, so you can talk directly to the people who create the code. And it is awesome. The community is very open.
These are virtual meetings.
Those are virtual over Zoom right now. Also, they are recorded, so if you're not that type of person that would like to interact with the people live, you can just watch it on
and
YouTube.
lurk. It's not a bad thing.
Yes.
Perk, this is great. Thank you for coming on. And it sounds like Sumo Logic is on the cloud native bus, right?
We are very excited to be here, and it's a very, very big step for us, and it's in a great direction for all of us. For us, I guess I believe that the OpenTelemetry, this convergence across the whole industry, is for the good reasons. It's to benefit the users, the end users. All the vendors using the same schema. Users are here to win, actually.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on, man. All right, we've got Marcin. I make sure I got this right. Stozek, Perk, from Sumo Logic here live in Amsterdam at Cloud Native Con, KubeCon. We're going to take a break. We've got our next guest lined up. Stand by. Hey, we're back here live in Amsterdam at KubeCon. It's the floor is open here, so it's kind of buzzing around. It's a little cold. I'm not going to lie. Yesterday, with that sun coming through, it warmed things up, but not as much sun today. Hey, but we do have a good friend here with us. We've got Stephen Chin. Stephen is, what is your title these days with JFrog? Stephen, I know you're a VP of something.
So I run the DevRel team, also the events organization, and I sit on all of our foundation bodies, so like the Cloud Native Compute Foundation.
Yes.
I'm the chair of the CD Foundation governing board, and also recently we've been making big investments in Rust. So
yes, I saw that. Actually, there was a dinner last night at the Rust Foundation. I think Mike Vizard was there from our team. I'd love to talk to you about Rust one day, because I think that's something our audience would like to know about, but a conversation for another day. Today we're going to talk about security a little bit, if it's okay.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
No, I think one of the things we've been talking about, and I feel strongly about, is a lot of companies are making investments in security. They have multiple security tools, dozens. A lot of our customers have 20 or more different security tools which they're using, they're scanning, they're trying to figure out what their vulnerability is, their attack surface, to try to remediate issues. And I think as an industry, we're doing security wrong.
So as someone who's been in the security industry for 25 years, I will tell you we're doing it better now than we used to. It used to be really wrong. I think what you're describing has several different reasons. Number one, just the way security organizations have been buying security solutions for 25 years has been just piling, in some cases, one piece of crap on another. And you know what you get at the end? A really large pile of crap. Number two, we're always searching for the next magic bullet. Like, oh, if I buy the JFrog product now, I am not going to have to use these other 12 products that I bought. But no one product is a panacea. And so then we wind up is just a mishmash.
Exactly, and it's not that having more results or having more databases you're looking for, that doesn't improve the quality of the results. What you really need is you need to have the right scores for your domain, for the sort of applications you're building, and then automated tools which are going to do the applicability or the contextual analysis of, are these CVs really relevant for you? And We just published a report on some of the top CVs from our security research team, but there were some really noteworthy ones which in NVD got very high severities, but for your average enterprise Kubernetes deployment, cloud deployment are very, very hard to exploit. One of them was in the ncurses library, but you had to have ncurses running, it had to be outputting it to a file, you had to have access to the file, you had to have local access to the server. For different contexts, the ability to do a DOS on a local account would be a big issue. But for cloud native topologies, how we're deploying, how we're running applications, it's not a common scenario. It'd be very hard for an attacker to exploit that. So that's one which was a high severity, and we recommended for like our customers and for the sort of folks who are using our software, it's really a low severity. But there's other examples where our security research team thinks it's a much more severe issue than what's published in NVD.
Yep.
One example of this is Snake YAML.
Yep.
So it's the most widely used YAML parser for Java. YAML files are used in a lot of enterprise applications. It's just a very common technology. And the exploit is very easy to trigger. You just need to give a specially constructed YAML file, which will do has a recursive structure, which does a stack buffer overflow, and then you do a DOS, like it just takes down the server. So easy to exploit. There's published things, and everybody's using it, but it received a moderate in the NVD.
It's not considered severe.
But for our use case and most of enterprise customers, that's a severe issue. Like that's something people can actually exploit in the wild.
So look, I was around when MITRE and NIST came up with the whole CVE system, right? And there was a ton of pushback on you can't take a vulnerability out of context and give it a criticality score.
Yeah.
You can't. You just, because context is everything. And there have been, more than several security solutions over the last 20 years that tried to bring some context to raw vulnerability scores, because I think we realize it's wrong. Now, unfortunately, the powers that be in the security world, I think we all realize it's not optimum. I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm going to say it's not optimum. We've all realized it's not optimum, and we've tried to, don't tell the emperor they have no clothes on. But we massage it by coming up with solutions that try to provide context.
Yeah, so I think one of the things we've done is we've married our security research team, which is very strong, with our product. And so, for example, for that Snake YAML configuration CV, it's a really easy fix. You just have to wrap it in a try catch and catch the Stack Overflow exception. Like, you've essentially prevented it. And what our scanner will do is it'll actually check your application. It'll see if you have the right exception wrapping around it to see if you've remediated the vulnerability. And even if you're using an older version of Snake YAML which has the vulnerability, or the newer versions, you can actually turn on the recursive processing, and you're still vulnerable in the latest versions if you have the right parameter set. So it'll check the parameters, it'll check your code, and it'll tell you for your application, for your context, is this vulnerability even applicable for you? And that's something, normally you'd get it as in a list of hundreds of CVs. You'd have to go through each one. You'd have to give justification why it's applicable or not applicable. And that's a lot of effort, which should be automated. Like, we should be automating this knowledge about how to remediate CVs, not having it be a manual process.
So again, I had a little experience with this. The problem, I'll give you a real world example. I'm at Citibank back then, 2008, 2007. They had 3 global CIOs at the time. I'm meeting with one of them in New York City. And our I was at Still Secure, a company I co-founded, and we had the ability to push patches, right, to remediate.
Yeah.
Sometimes you patch and sometimes you just put in a firewall rule or a routing rule or something, a routing table, and you could remediate. Citibank, I tried to sell it to Citi. It was going to be a multi-million-dollar deal, big deal. They called me in, and the CIO told me, we will never do that. Why? Well, because it takes us 60 to 90 days to test a remediation before we will put it into our production, because we're mission critical and we're Citi. And I'm not banging Citi. I'm just, that was the mindset then. Has the mindset changed now, Stephen, where people are willing to say, yeah, I'm going to remediate it, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead? Because sometimes in a remediation, you break something else.
Yeah, no, I think this is an interesting point. And so basically, if you look at like the release process,
right?
You have your release pipelines, you're pushing things to production, you make sure that you have some way to fall back to previous versions or feature flags to turn things on and off. And I think we've come a long way in terms of doing safe, continuous updates. And the biggest factor which has been pushing this acceleration is security vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So you have to be ready for the next Log4j or Log4Shell, right? Like when a big security vulnerability hits and you have attackers which are actively trying to exploit it, trying to find vulnerable systems, 60 to 90 days is not fast enough.
Absolutely.
That puts
so
your
they
business,
fast track it to 30 days. Okay? But this, I think, this is a problem between, let's call them unicorns and horses, right? In Gene Kim terminology, which is companies that maybe are fully cloud native, fully, embrace DevOps, and can do a rollback rather quickly, are more likely to do that. I think the bulk of organizations still, though, are like test first, deploy after. And so, when you're Citi and you're rolling it out, or I'll give you another, for instance, I dealt with a very large government, one of the largest private networks in the world from DoD, 400,000 nodes. It's not an easy thing. You want to push to 400,000 and then say, oops, I got to roll it back and unroll 400,000 nodes. That's a problem.
Yeah, no, I think it's a challenge, but this is something which really, security is the major driver for acceleration of updates, and
it has to be.
In large server-side deployments, it's challenging, but you can do nice things with Kubernetes and load balancing, and like updating parts of your cluster, as long as it's not like a breaking change in your APIs. And I think consumers are getting a lot more used to this as well, because they have continuous updates on mobile phones and
we're
devices.
Used to that now.
And like you're not surprised when you end up on a slightly different version of a web application because they're like updating it in stages.
Absolutely. So I think there's some intelligent ways to go about this. Number one, is there a way I could sort of isolate a vulnerability so it's not exploitable until I could fully remediate? So in other words, a partial remediation, quarantine, if you will. And it's something we did with our NAC product. Quarantine it until I could remediate it is one way of looking at it. The second thing is you mentioned APIs. So this to me is the new frontier in vulnerabilities, right? Even OAuth now is coming out with their, the API vulnerabilities and stuff, because so much of today's communication takes place over APIs. It's a whole new class of vulnerabilities sort of here.
Yeah, I think on the first one, it depends on the vulnerability, but there's a lot of cases like with the Log4Shell exploit, you can put in a flag to turn off the JNLP support. That would make the vulnerability unexploitable, even if you were on a older version of Log4j. So that was a good way of remediating that without the risk of upgrading. Because when you upgrade an entire component, you have to retest everything.
And that's exactly what I'm getting at.
Potential risk.
But let's be clear. That's not a permanent solution, right?
Exactly.
Until you upgrade it.
There's often a good remediation strategy that's lower risk than doing a full component swap.
Yep.
And I think that sort of like knowledge about the exploit, how you remediate it, how you look at it, that's really what you need a strong vulnerability team to give you all of the context, give you steps for remediating, give you all of that contextual information.
So I just want to interject that this is going to be a great conversation for next week when we're live at RSA.
Exactly.
And we'll be having these conversations. APIs, though. Is this something JFrog, API vulnerability, is this something JFrog is looking at yet or will be looking at? What do you think?
I think it's a big vulnerability and risk for organizations. It requires like some sort of testing or fuzzing to figure out API vulnerabilities for companies. We're kind of expanding out our security offerings to give like a much wider set of source, binary, runtime vulnerability analysis. And I think that the whole gamut of things you need to cover for security is quite wide now. Like attackers are finding different ways into our corporate environment.
Well, this is why we're seeing these, attack surface management is becoming such a, not a buzzword, but a real important aspect of this, because you can't defend what you don't know, and a lot of organizations struggle. A lot of organizations struggle with just understanding what their assets are. What do they have out there? What does it look like to the hacker's eye view, as we used to call it, right? It's interesting times. But I don't want to end on a down note. I will tell you, as someone who's been in the vulnerability space since 2003, we are so much better now than we were then, because back then it was a real crap show. I got to be honest with you. And progress, the days are long, the years go quick when it comes to security.
I'm being a little dramatic saying we're all doing it wrong. I think that the approaches are getting more modern.
Yes.
The attackers are also getting better at exploiting vulnerabilities.
That's the problem too, is this is a constant cat and mouse game. And no matter how smart we get as cats, we got tough mice, right? And it is what it is. One other quick topic I'm going to throw in, and I don't mean to throw you for a curve. How is AI going to help us with this?
So that's a good question. So I think one of the things where like a lot of the vulnerabilities are coming from is from fuzzers, from different machine technologies, which are helping us search for vulnerabilities and open source code bases and different components. And the advantage is that if we can develop algorithms to automatically detect vulnerabilities, then that makes it easier for research teams to find vulnerabilities before it's discovered by malicious attackers.
Stop the next 0 day before it's minus 1 day.
And I think the other big part of this is adopting technologies which make it easier to build applications which are less prone to security vulnerabilities. So memory-safe languages like Rust are a good way to protect the applications you're writing, or to make sure that you have fewer potential risks, because as long as you're not using unsafe libraries, then it automatically protects you against buffer overflows and standard programming
sort of the garden variety stuff.
Exactly.
And as long as you're using safe libraries, famous last words, right? Because that is the underpinning of all of this, right? That the libraries, the components that we're building stuff on, we're trusting them. And that'll be for another day. We could discuss that, okay, Steven? Anyway, hey, we are live here at KubeCon. Steven Chin from JFrog here with us. Are you speaking with us at RSA next week or somewhere? I know I have Gal Marder on a panel I'm doing about DevSecOps.
I might be. I think I might.
But I think we have you on. We'll continue the conversation on Broadcast Alley there.
Cool. Sounds good.
Stay tuned. About a week from now. For now, though, we're going to take a break. We are live here at KubeCon. We're going to be back with our next guest in just a moment.
Is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Paul Chulov, who's CEO for SecureAuth, and we're talking about how Arculix has been integrated with the cloud platform from HashiCorp, known as Vault, that a lot of people use to keep their secrets in their applications. But the question then becomes, how do we kind of make that easier for everybody else? Paul, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here again. Good to see you.
So walk us through exactly what you guys are doing with the HashiCorp and how does this all come together in a way that makes everybody's security situation that much better?
Yeah, sure thing. So HashiCorp obviously is widely deployed, from a vaulting perspective in a wide range of cloud DevOps environments. And customers, because they utilize that really to store the keys to the kingdom, but there's still an administrative capability to get into that product from a password perspective, are somewhat exposed to the same, challenges of username and passwords in any application. So what we're helping HashiCorp do by integrating our Arculix product is really bring that next generation multi-factor authentication, but do that in a very frictionless, passwordless way. So by layering on top, we create that very seamless way to access the HashiCorp Vault without having to jump through a lot of hoops. And doing that reduces friction, but it also improves security.
You think the bad guys are shifting their focus a little bit? They were phishing individual developers, but maybe they figured out, hey, there's this thing called Vault, and if we can phish that, we'll get all the secrets.
We've definitely seen a transition. I think, account takeover can take many forms and factors. Individual, phishing to an individual obviously takes a lot of time. And if you can get to something where, a lot more data is stored, especially around something like a cloud system, then you can move, horizontally and vertically much faster. So yeah, I think anytime you have a central system, you have to be a little bit more careful with it than you do individual accounts and applications.
Everybody and his brother is talking about not only just shifting security left towards developers, but they're also talking about zero trust. What's your sense of the progress we're making on both those fronts?
I think, look, it's a long-term evolution. Some organizations are ahead. I know I was speaking at a conference this week and kind of did a show of hands in the audience and just said, how many of you have actually rolled out this kind of a technology? It was maybe, 15, 20% of the room. And I think that's probably true for, both the shift left movement, but more important, zero trust. In the zero trust world, one of the things that I have seen happening over the last few years is an acknowledgement that zero trust is much larger than I think a lot of people initially imagined it to be. Started off much more on the network side. And I think as we've rotated back towards identity and identity security being the center of a zero trust, people recognize that they may be a little bit further behind on the maturity curve for that area. And so it's going to take longer to, really get to a long-term point of view on zero trust in their organizations. But people are making progress.
So what makes shifting towards an identity-based approach to security difficult? I mean, what's the hurdle that people encounter? I think people understand the general idea and the philosophy, but what do they encounter when they go to do it?
Well, a lot of legacy complexities. I think IAM over the decades that I've been doing this has been fraught with a lot of complexity and a lot of stagnation in terms of its ability to, really help an organization embrace rapid change in the enterprise. And so, if you think about a large financial institution, on one side, they're trying to boldly embrace the cloud and SaaS applications. On the other side, they may still be, running a mainframe. And so when you're trying to bring a zero trust architecture and approach to all of those very disparate systems, it takes time to be able to go in, evolve your identity platform, figure out what the right, balance is between security and user friction, when you look at it through the lens that we do on the authentication side. And it just takes time. So sometimes, I think unlike an application, when you have an enterprise platform in place, the time it takes to, retrofit it, migrate it, move to the next generation is typically measured in years and sometimes decades, not, months or quarters.
That seems to me at the core of the issue. I mean, each platform has its own way of managing identity, and each application has its own way of managing identity. And somehow or other, I want to unify all that. How much effort is that really required? Because it seems like, every time I add a new app or a new platform, I just make the situation worse.
In a lot of ways that you do. I was chatting with a old colleague of mine that works at a large pharma company a couple of days ago, and one of the things that he said that they were struggling with is the fact that so much old technology is embedded in their operational processes that they're running platforms that have been decommissioned by the vendor, sometimes 5 and 10 years ago, because they can't afford to take those systems offline to do an upgrade. So when you're battling that on one side and you've got the next, sometimes you almost have to split the environment for a certain period of time, which is why technologies like what we're doing on the Arculix side become important, because it can become a layer over those legacy platforms and allow you to start improving things without necessarily having to rip and replace that legacy infrastructure.
I was having a chat with somebody about secrets and the management thereof, and it was their position that some of the older developers are worse than the new developers, because the older developers have been just kind of putting secrets in clear text in their applications for years as kind of a backdoor workaround during the development process, and then they forget to take them out, and lo and behold, they show up in a production environment. So is this somewhat of a generational issue, do you think?
I think it is. I think as more and more of those legacy applications are decommissioned, and you move to much more modern paradigms for whether it's cloud, SaaS development, you're going to see removal of some of those bad, not best practices, but old practices, in favor of new technologies and new platforms where the developers don't have to think as much about building that component, because they can pull that in from one of the cloud platforms like AWS or Azure.
Now, there are other ways of managing secrets. So is this the first in a series of things you guys will be doing to make it easier to access these kinds of repositories?
Yeah, no, we see HashiCorp as one area that organizations are using for this. There are obviously a wide range of other technologies. So we'll continue to forge new industry partnerships and then support the technical integration on the back end. But this is something that we're super excited about, and I know that the HashiCorp team is too.
One of the things that people are concerned about these days is that there's all these generative AI platforms that the bad guys might get a hold of, and then they'll be able to create a artificial representation of somebody that might fool something, and the next thing you know, they're hacking into everything. So how do we make sure that those artificial identities don't get access to things that we don't want them to get access to?
Well, I think we're going to use artificial intelligence to do that. So one of the things that we are really excited about is our AI ML-based risk engine. And it can look for those biobehavioral patterns, which are very different when you have automation doing something versus a human. And so if we expect a human identity to be authenticating, whether it's into something like Hashi or something else, there's a biobehavioral pattern that transaction should follow. And by looking at authentication as a much more continuous process where we're gathering data before the actual authentication event and then continuing to gather data post-authentication after authorization, we get to watch and see, and we can compare. Now, there are certain systems that may actually be intentionally accessed by automation, right? I mean, that is a use case today. And so we just have to be able, the engine has to be able to recognize those differences. And if it's a human identity and it's starting to act like an automated bot, then we can take additional steps and either do step-up authentication that only a human would be able to interact with, or decommission that particular session and force, re-authentication from the very beginning. So in a way, it's like the old adage, fight fire with fire. I think, as AI starts to be deployed as a threat actor, we're going to have to fight that with AI.
All right. My AI model can beat up your AI model. The next question, though, is, do we think too much about identity as associated with humans, and we're not realizing that applications have identity, machines have identity? I mean, my identity can get pretty granular.
Identity is very complex and very granular, and I think the entire IAM industry has recognized that we're not only trying to deal with human identities, but I think a lot of customers have to also embrace that same paradigm shift and understand that, anytime I'm letting something access an application, data store, platform, I have to understand that it is fundamentally an identity and needs to be managed. It has a life cycle. It has, certain things that it can and can't do, and you have to be able to enforce that. And I think it's one of the reasons that we've seen new vendors coming into the landscape that are only focusing on machine identities, as their primary, purpose for being. But at the same time, I also worry a little bit about, so many disparate points of view and models being created that we don't re-centralize them and bring them all back together. So you get that one universal view and control point for all identities, no matter whether they're human or machine. And no matter what the end identity is designed to do. In a lot of organizations, they're still struggling with the idea that they have internal identities that are full-time employees. They have contractor identities that need a different set of capabilities. They have partners or B2B, people that need access to internal systems. And then you start layering in all the consumers and citizens and everybody else. It begins to be very complex. That gets magnified, when you look at it through the non-human identity world.
So what's your best advice to folks about how to get started with all this? Because it does seem to me that there's a certain amount of inertia in the system, right? People have been using passwords since the first caveman grunted, "Who goes there?" So, how do we move from where we are to where we need to go?
Yeah, I think two things are probably important. One is people ought to spend time really mapping out what that long-term strategy is for their organization. Where are you today? What's the maturity curve for each of the major elements look like? And how do you want to get there? I think a lot of people sometimes end up being very tactical, responding to a breach, responding to an audit deficiency, and that's fine. Sometimes you have to do that. But really sketching out where you want to be in terms of your kind of zero trust identity, centric security strategy is complex, and it takes time to really know where you want to go. But if you don't take the time to know where you want to go, it's hard to end up in the right spot. But then behind that, I think you have to be willing sometimes to take a stepwise approach. You're not going to go solve that in one fell swoop. So, begin to think about where you can have the biggest impact for your organization today. And then how does that layer into that long-term strategy, and take those baby steps towards that longer maturity cycle, but make sure you're having a tangible impact on the business. And the other thing that I would say, and this was a big theme at the conference I was at this past week, is you've got to balance user experience and security in a very different way than people have in the past. I think as security practitioners, especially for workforce and other kinds of identities, we felt like we had control over the person and we could just force security down their throats. There's a real backlash beginning to happen. And so I think people have to decide, how do I make this security experience more user-friendly so that people embrace and are part of security, not fighting against it?
All right, folks, you heard it here. If your approach to identity is somewhat schizophrenic, the good news is you're not alone. But you guys should start thinking about how to kind of work your way through that whole process, because otherwise you're just going to drive yourself and everybody else even more crazy than we already are. Paul, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. Great talking to you.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Mike Leiborg, who's CISO for Swimlane, and we're talking about the progress that government agencies are making on securing their software supply chains. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Good to be here.
I think it's been about a year since the government issued their famous executive order, and we've been kind of waiting for the downstream impact of that to play out, because it takes a while for government agencies to get their act together in terms of new regulations, new requirements, and then everybody gets a long lead time. What's your sense of, are we making enough progress here, and is it happening fast enough?
I think so. All in all, it's such a massive scope that impacts all of the federal agencies as well as us, the software developers, right? So I think moving forward, there's a lot still to be uncovered on different formats and templates and everything else that we should use and best practices. But overall, it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Is it your sense that the development teams are taking charge of this, or is it the security folks who are leading the way, or are we actually starting to see some level of collaboration among them both?
I think that's a great question. A lot of the friction generally comes from where the developers want to move with speed and ease. They have a job to do just as well as the security teams do. And obviously the security teams wants to have greater observability, visibility into the whole supply chain and everything that is going on that could negatively impact our products, our customers. So it is definitely a joint effort, and a lot of education that comes with it to make everybody aware of the risks that are inherited by using free and open source or just your general supply chain with vulnerabilities and secrets and all the management that comes as part of those vehicles.
Have you seen any best practices for achieving that goal in terms of bringing those teams together? Are there tips and tricks that you've seen people do? I mean, do I just throw them all in a room and lock the door and buy them pizza and hope for the best, or is there some other way to think about this?
Yeah, it is definitely do small iterations of improvements. So focus on the biggest risks first, and then kind of drill that down and then get better. There's a really interesting, or not really interesting, but a pretty solid framework that's called the Secure Supply Chain Consumption Framework. So the C2F that's readily available for people to consume or companies to consume. And it clearly kind of goes step by step on things to consider as we ingest all of this data and kind of how we scan and inventory it, and even goes into SBOM, which is a whole topic on itself, but equally important.
SBOMs, of course, are where people start with this whole process, but it seems to me we're creating a lot of SBOMs maybe, but we haven't really thought through how to operationalize those SBOMs. I mean, once I create the SBOM, everybody's got an SBOM. How do I know what's in the SBOM, and how do I figure out what to do as a result of what is surfaced in the SBOM?
Yeah, I think here at Swimlane, we're still going through that maturity process because there's so many different standards. So especially when it comes to some of the vulnerability and findings on how do we measure, how do we make sure, and which standards did we follow. So we're still kind of waiting a little bit on the government to tell us, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue moving in the right direction of picking an SBOM that works by, with, and through your environment. If it can be automated through third-party tools to give you greater visibility and ability to flex. I think one good example is there's Cyclone DX, right? They have an Exchange API that kind of allows you to stay fluid as the process matures. And then there's the software package data exchange, and there's several ISO bodies as well and documents that kind of call out the best practices on what do we need to track in that SBOM. But there are now additional considerations as far as like what are the hashes of everything. So how can you confirm that the information that you're consuming or your customers are consuming is identical to what you're delivering, right? As well as what you're bringing into your pipeline. The whole life cycle, where you're at in the phases of this development, and also signatures. Are you going to sign it? We can see for years that there's software signatures, even by some of the largest companies in the world, that are not greatly being adopted. So how do we lean on the right standards and formats to make sure that what we are moving towards is in fact the best practice?
Sometimes when we focus on something, we inadvertently shine a light on an issue that the bad guys can then exploit. So my question is do you think that we're seeing more criminals looking at ways to compromise these supply chains, in part because we've been talking about it so much for the last year?
Yeah, I think that there was a study last year by Sonatype that stated that we've seen an increase in the last couple of years by over 700% when it comes to supply chain attacks. So that is definitely one of our fears, as well as anybody else's. Well, when we fully disclose and make this bill of material readily available for anyone, now they can go through that pick list and saying, okay, well, what's an easy vector in? So I still think that there should be some sort of controls around on how and who can consume that information on all the products in the world.
Is it your sense that government agencies are ahead of or behind traditional enterprises in terms of securing their software supply chains?
I think they're getting there. They're probably getting ahead of it, especially with a lot of the large, Sunburst or Orion and these really large third-party compromises that have occurred in the last couple of years. The visibility is definitely there, and everybody's is kind of scrambling towards what's that next milestone and how do we protect and prioritize the highest risks right now.
Do you think as a result of that prioritization, we're seeing more organizations embrace DevSecOps? I mean, I think we were down that path as it was, but is that pace accelerating?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of really great tooling out there right now that wasn't here a couple of years ago when we really started talking about it. So I think as long as we, as consumers, as well as producers, bring these tools into our stack and do the proper selection and betting on making sure that it's going to fit whatever operating model that we're under, that'll definitely help us all out in the long run.
What do you think is the single biggest issue then that organizations are kind of looking at? Because it seems to me, at least, that half of this is technical and the other half is cultural, but which one is the more challenging?
I think culture is really a big challenge. You can obviously consume these, or you can procure these tools to help you out, but if you don't update and kind of shift your culture to have everybody embrace third party and supply chain risks and manage everything accordingly, then you just have a bunch of tools that may or may not be doing you any good, right? There's also a big step in the later part of some of these frameworks that you go kind of from auditing of knowing, okay, here's everything that we have. Let's audit and make sure that our processes are kind of working, to when you start enforcing it. I think that's definitely where friction is going to come in, because when you stop blocking teams from being productive, possibly because of a risk introduced into the systems, that takes away a lot of the fun for our developer friends, right? So big culture shift, a lot of education, and figure out how to do this with the least amount of impact to people's creativity and productivity.
When we think about friction, of course, the topic of AI almost always comes up because people are basically trying to figure out ways to use AI to remove the friction and eliminate a lot of the toil. So what's your sense of what is the state of AI as we apply it to software supply chains?
I think we could definitely lean on it. There's a lot to be kind of still learned from artificial intelligence in general. But as we start using it more and more, I'm hoping that we'll see some favorable results.
You're a long-time CISO and you've been working with dev teams forever. What's that one thing you see developers doing over and over again that just makes you shake your head and say, folks, I think we can be better than that?
I think a lot of it actually comes down to the development framework, or the SDLC, or whatever we want to call it, or the supply chain, right? not so much where I'm currently at, but in other places, I've seen where maybe a team goes in, we identify a vulnerability, and we go ahead and remediate that. And we test it, everything's good, everybody's happy. And then because of some drift in some of the systems, someone later goes and adds another or re-adds that same vulnerability back into the pipeline, right? I think that's one of probably the most common that you see. Another one, talking to a lot of my peers, is secrets management. So credentials, as they're testing and deving, unfortunately, sometimes people do not follow best practice, and they just inject a secret into part of their code. And if that makes it through the pipeline, now this could be a really high risk where either you have exposed then these credentials to anybody out there.
How do I go about shifting left to your point here about educating the developers? Because a lot of them, when they were in school, security was an elective. Most of them didn't take it. So how do we go back in and kind of give them that appreciation for security in a way that they'll actually do it? Because we keep seeing the same classes of vulnerabilities over and over again at the application layer. So what is it that's going to make them actually embrace the shift left?
I think we have to use a bit of a maybe carrot and a stick, or that might not be the right kind of way to look at it, but we have to award obviously good behavior, and we have to use training and kind of like workshops. I think is probably a really good way of putting people in a conference room. I think you said earlier, and locking the door, maybe in that fashion, but having the ability to sit down, go through a sprint interactively and say, okay, let's go ahead and bring this in. Have we kind of cloned it? How are we ingesting it? How are we scanning it? Are there process improvements? And kind of make everybody aware of everything that the security teams are doing and seeing as code is flowing through, whether that is on open source or container images that are being brought in, to show them all the steps that this is what the security teams are doing and monitoring while you're going through your next sprint, for example. And that way they see that when tickets are generated and they now have created some technical debt, they see what it takes to resolve it, and using that as part of the education of saying, hey, if we would have, could have, should have done this at the very entry point, we could have mitigated a lot of this downstream and technical debt work that now is holding up the next release or whatever that may be.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Positive reinforcement goes a long way. And if we're all focused on new features, developers will focus on new features and not security. So maybe the problem is we just don't give the developers enough incentive to focus on security. Hey, Mike, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Mike. It was my pleasure.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
Discover the cutting-edge insights of our new show, AI Times, a series that explores the limitless potential of artificial intelligence. Sponsored by the AI Infrastructure Alliance, the AI Times is at the forefront of the AI revolution, tackling the crucial questions of how we can leverage AI for the betterment of humanity. Stay ahead of the curve as this show delves into all things surrounding AI, including trends, pressing concerns, and the positive impact AI is making around the globe. AI Times.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry experts to give you the latest in the tech world. But don't you leave just yet. We will be live streaming our RSAC 2023 coverage starting at 12 p.m. Eastern, as well as 9 a.m. Pacific time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.